Hi everyone, my name is Henrik Fåhraeus and I am the lead designer of Crusader Kings II. Today I'm going to talk to you about our latest expansion, Conclave. The main purpose with this expansion is essentially to increase the challenge in the mid to late game by making the game deeper and more interesting. There are two avenues of attack, internal and external mechanics. Externally, we are making sure that the other rulers in the game are actually a bit smarter and band up against you better. And internally, we want to make sure that your vassals cause more problems in an interesting way. So let's take a look at the new external mechanics. First off, we have the coalition system, which is essentially a type of defensive alliance. As countries get bigger and become dangerous, their neighbors will tend to form a coalition against them. We have also done things with the proper alliances. Previously, you just married a close relative of someone and you would get an alliance. We've changed that so that marriages give a non-aggression pact, and then you have to take an additional action to actually form a proper alliance. If you've formed an alliance, you'll have to stand by it, and if your ally is attacked or attacks someone, you are automatically dragged into their conflicts. Another huge area of improvement is the AI. The whole dynamic to warfare is changed. Previously, it was fairly easy to just save up the money, hire a mercenary company, win a single decisive battle, and then there wasn't really much they could do about it. So what we're aiming for instead is to drag out the wars a little bit, make them last longer with more battles, and allow the enemy, and of course yourself, to make a comeback. Fewer soldiers will die. On the other hand, morale damage can be higher. If an army loses a battle, it will now retreat several provinces back in order to recuperate and regain morale. Another big change we've also made in the same vein is that armies standing in a friendly province will actually reinforce. As you know, only holding levies used to reinforce, but now the actual armies will reinforce first, and then the holding will reinforce. This means that levies become more tenacious and can stick around for a longer, more dragged out conflict. That's it about the external changes, if you will. Let's take a look at the internal changes we've made as well. As you know, the vassals are the kind of driving force behind internal strife in Crusader Kings, and they really should make the late game more interesting and hard. So what we made now is make sure that rebellious vassals actually band up into large, dangerous factions. And to give the player some control and ways of discouraging this, we have developed the council. And the way this works is the councillors can no longer normally join factions. So it might be a good idea to actually appoint your most powerful vassals to the council. I wish it was that easy. Of course, if the council is not content, the councillors are then free to join factions again. Each councillor has a certain position on political issues. For example, a councillor can be a glory hound, which means that they like declaring wars and they want the realm to be at war. And whenever you take an action as the ruler, the council will show, or basically vote, on the issue. This doesn't prevent you from taking action, it's just that if you override the will of the council, it will be discontent, and the councillors will then be free to join factions for a couple of years. In addition, we have also added a system of favors. You can gain and call in favors from your vassals and councillors especially. And using favors, you can get them to change their stance or position on various political issues. Of course, you can also use favors for other things in events and so on that we have added in the game. It's closely related to blackmail, actually. Also related to the council, we have expanded on the realm laws. Instead of having crown authority, which is a kind of very generic law, we've split it up into various smaller laws that will allow the council to have an opinion about various actions. For example, can you change laws freely, or should the council be allowed to have a say in that? Managing your vassals through the council becomes a new type of gameplay, and you will have to look out for these bigger, more powerful internal factions. It comes into play later in the game when you have a bigger realm. It doesn't punish the smaller beginning countries, which is exactly the effect that we are after. That's that about the challenge in the game, which is again the main point of this expansion. But we have also added a lot of other features. The biggest one is probably a completely revised education system. where, taking a page from the Way of Life expansion, we have changed it so that the ruler or parent actually sets a focus for the child. And there are 2 stages to that process: the early childhood, basically ages 6 to 11, when the personality of the child is actually shaped, and then the second stage, ages 12 to 16, where you set an education focus for the child based on one of the 5 base attributes. You can pick a diplomatic education track, and then you cannot change it. And of course the child will then get a diplomatic education outcome. Now, the cool thing about the adolescence events is that it's a period where things like rivalries and friendships are created that can last for a whole lifetime. And you know, teenagers can be pretty rebellious and troublesome. They have depressions and so on. So it's kind of a different theme to these events and the early childhood events. We've also added dynamic mercenaries for everyone. It was a very popular mechanic in the Horse Lords expansion, but we felt it was a shame that it's limited to only the Turks and the nomadic peoples of the steppes. So we're now allowing everyone to actually create these mercenary companies and send them out into the world to make an extra buck for you. I think that's it for now, so stay tuned for more information later on, especially the written dev diaries and so on. Thanks all for listening.